Let me take you back to a simpler time on social media. When you opened Twitter before 2016, you saw posts in the order they were posted, simple, straightforward. What you saw was determined by who you chose to follow. But then everything changed. Twitter introduced an algorithmically curated feed called For You, and after Elon Musk acquired the platform in 2022, this algorithmic view became the default. That seemingly small change had enormous consequences. Researchers from universities across Europe conducted a rigorous study over 7 weeks in 2023, and what they discovered should concern everyone. The algorithm does not just show you content, it shapes your political reality. Here, what the data reveals: conservative posts were about 20% more likely to appear in user feeds. Liberal posts only about 3% more likely, but the bias went deeper than simple political affiliation. Traditional news content was suppressed by nearly 60%, while posts from political activists jumped by more than 27%. The algorithm was not just favoring one side, it was actively restructuring how users encountered information. Now here, where this gets genuinely troubling. The researchers surveyed real users and asked them to switch between the algorithmic feed and the old chronological timeline. The results were stark. Users on the algorithmic feed became almost 5 percentage points more likely to prioritize Republican policy issues like inflation, immigration, and crime. They became more than 5 percentage points more likely to view investigations into Donald Trump as unacceptable. And here is the most chilling part: when researchers switched these users back to a neutral feed, their views did not revert. The algorithmic influence had lingering effects, partly because users had begun following more conservative influencers during their time in the algorithmic environment. 4.7% might sound small, but in electoral politics that margin is more than enough to swing an election. Here is something that might change how you think about your feed. A team of researchers in the United States found a way to do something remarkable. They created a browser extension that could alter what people saw on X in real time. This allowed them to run an actual experiment during the 2024 presidential campaign with over 1,200 volunteers. What they discovered was groundbreaking. When the researchers reduced the amount of hostile and polarizing content, people saw polarization actually went down. When they increased it, polarization went up. This might sound obvious, but here is why it matters. Previous studies funded by Meta claimed that algorithms on Facebook and Instagram had no real effect on political polarization. This new independent research directly contradicts those findings. The numbers are striking. Users who were switched to X's algorithm were nearly 5 percentage points more likely to prioritize Republican policy issues like immigration and crime. They were also more than 5 percentage points more likely to believe that investigations into Trump were unacceptable. That might sound small, but in an election, 5% is everything. And here is the most concerning part: even after the algorithm was changed back, those views did not reset. The effect lingered. Because users had started following more conservative accounts, the algorithm had literally reshaped their information ecosystem. This reveals something crucial about how outrage works as a business model. The algorithm does not just show you conflict, it changes who you trust, what you believe, and how you see the world, and those changes stick. Political actors understand this. When they post something designed to make you angry, they are not just seeking attention, they are hacking a system that rewards conflict with permanent influence. When Elon Musk acquired Twitter in late 2022, he declared himself a free speech absolutist. But what happened next tells a more complicated story about whose speech actually gets amplified. A major study, published in the journal Nature, examined this question with remarkable precision. Researchers recruited nearly 5,000 participants and split them into two groups. One group used only the chronological feed, which shows posts in the order they were made. The other group used only the algorithmic For You feed. This went on for 7 weeks. The results were striking. Participants exposed to the algorithmic feed consistently shifted toward conservative viewpoints. They began following conservative activist accounts. And here is the crucial part: they kept following those accounts even after the experiment ended. The algorithm had permanently altered their media diet. This was not an isolated finding. Sky News ran a month-long experiment and found significant algorithmic bias toward far-right content. The Wall Street Journal and Washington Post published similar analyses. Queensland University found the algorithm pushes pro-Republican accounts. The pattern across multiple independent studies is consistent. But why is this happening? Part of the answer lies in what the algorithm rewards. Researchers found that rude or disrespectful language gets greater visibility, especially when linked to misleading content. Controversy drives engagement, and engagement drives profit. Meanwhile, content moderation has been dramatically scaled back. One investigation found that X failed to act on 99% of hate speech posts from paid premium subscribers. Accounts that would have been suspended before were now protected by their paid status. Musk himself has become an active participant in this ecosystem. With over 200 million followers, his posts questioning mainstream media and promoting right-wing narratives receive massive amplification. The platform that once positioned itself as a neutral town square has become something quite different: a space where algorithmic curation systematically elevates certain political perspectives while burying others, all while claiming to defend free speech. Let us talk about one of the most fascinating experiments playing out on social media right now. When X, formerly known as Twitter, introduced its community notes feature, plenty of critics laughed it off. The idea seemed almost absurd. How could the same crowd that spreads misinformation be trusted to police it? But here's where things get interesting. A major study from researchers at the University of Rochester, the University of Illinois, and the University of Virginia found something surprising. This crowdsourced approach actually works. The numbers tell a compelling story. Researchers analyzed over 264,000 posts that received community notes during 2 critical periods. One was right before a US presidential election, when misinformation typically floods the platform. The other came a few months after. What they found was striking: posts with publicly visible correction notes were 32% more likely to be deleted by their own authors. Let that sink in for a moment. The people who posted the misleading content chose to remove it themselves. This gets at something really important. When experts or algorithms try to define misinformation and remove it, people often push back. They cry censorship, they claim bias. But when your own peers call you out, something different happens. There is social pressure. There is a moment of reflection. The system works through a helpfulness threshold. A note needs to earn a score of at least 0.4 to appear publicly. The algorithm even prioritizes input from people who typically disagree with each other. This prevents any one political side from gaming the system. So while the feed algorithm continues to amplify viral content at breakneck speed, community notes offers something of a counterweight. It is not perfect, it is not instant, but it represents a fascinating bet on human nature. The bet is that when confronted by their own community, people might just choose truth over engagement. Let me tell you about something that should change how you think about your feed. Researchers ran a remarkable experiment during the 2024 presidential campaign. They recruited over 1,200 volunteers and used a clever browser extension to alter what those users saw on X in real time. This was independent research done without any cooperation from the platform itself. What they found was startling. When users switched from a simple chronological feed to X's algorithmic one, they became nearly 5 percentage points more likely to prioritize issues important to Republicans, things like inflation, immigration, and crime. They also became more than 5 percentage points more likely to view investigations into Trump as unacceptable. Now here is the part that keeps researchers up at night. Even after the algorithm was switched back off, those views did not revert. The effect lingered, because users had started following more conservative influencers during their time in the algorithmic feed. The algorithm had literally rewired their information ecosystem for context. 5 percentage points is more than enough to swing an election, and interestingly, this effect appears unique to X. Previous studies on Facebook and Instagram found no such relationship, but those earlier studies were funded by Meta, which raises some uncomfortable questions about who gets to study these platforms and what they find. This brings us to the new political playbook. If algorithms can shift voter priorities, and those changes stick even after exposure ends, then controlling the algorithm means controlling a piece of the electorate's worldview. Political operatives have figured this out. Paid verification lets anyone buy algorithmic priority. Bot networks can flood conversations with manufactured momentum, and astroturfing campaigns can create the illusion of grassroots support where none exists. The old assumption was that social media merely reflected public opinion. The evidence now suggests it can create it. Let me take you into what might be the most troubling part of this story. During the 2024 US presidential campaign, a team of researchers did something clever. They built a browser extension that let them modify what people saw on X without needing permission from the platform itself. Over 10 days, they studied more than 1,200 volunteers, and what they found should concern everyone who cares about democracy. The results, published in the journal Science, provided clear causal evidence. When people were exposed to more content expressing partisan hostility and anti-democratic attitudes, their polarization increased. When that exposure decreased, polarization went down. This might sound obvious, but here is why it matters. Previous research funded by Meta had claimed no such relationship existed on Facebook or Instagram. This new independent study directly contradicts those findings. Even more striking was what happened when researchers compared X's algorithm to a simple reverse chronological feed. Users exposed to X's algorithm were nearly 5 percentage points more likely to prioritize Republican-leaning policy issues like immigration and crime. They were over 5 percentage points more likely to view investigations into Trump as unacceptable. And here is the part that should keep you up at night. When the algorithm was switched off, those views did not revert. The effect lingered, because users had followed more conservative influencers during their time in the algorithmic feed. 4.7% might sound small in electoral terms. It is enormous. It is enough to swing an election. This brings us to the heart of the problem. When citizens can no longer agree on basic facts because their feeds show them completely different realities, democratic deliberation becomes impossible. We end up with what researchers call a mixed reality, where virtual and real-world dynamics collide. The question we are left with is not whether algorithms shape politics, they clearly do. The question is whether we will demand transparency and user control before the next election, or whether we will accept that whoever controls the algorithm increasingly controls our democracy.